You know, I was not expecting to make another one of these video guides so soon. There I was, finally having the time to work through Orleans, when suddenly, Gil, out tomorrow, out of nowhere. But you know what? It's all good. A lot of you are requesting a Gil video, so without further ado, let's just get this started. Now, I know that there is a ton of hype for Gil. Hell, I'm hyped for Gilgamesh. I have 120 quartz ready to burn on that gacha. We all know how great of a character he is, but how good of a servant is he in Fate Grand Order? So before we trip over ourselves to empty our wallets, let's just actually take a good look at him, and just like with Saber, we're going to be looking at his skills, his stats, and then follow it up with a brief guide and an overall rating. So what do Gil's stats look like? Well, his HP is on the low end for 5 stars at only 13,097, but his attack is through the roof at 12,280. That means at release he'll have the second highest attack stat in the game in North America among all the servants. And even in Japan, he's still in the top 10 among the 150 plus servants that they have there. So he's an offensive juggernaut. And when it comes to the trade-off between attack and HP, attack is far more valuable, so stat-wise, Gil is in a very great position where he hits like a truck, but he's not as fragile as a glass cannon berserker. Skill-wise, Gil has a Charisma A+, which buffs the party's attack between 10.5 to 21% for 3 turns, much like Saber's. He also has Golden Rule A, which increases his Noble Phantasm gain between 20 to 50%. And he has Collector X, which increases star absorption between 30 to 600%, and that can actually be upgraded via an interlude to also charge his Noble Phantasm gauge between 20 to 30%. For his passives, he has Independent Action A+, to increase his crit damage by 11%, he has Magic Resistance E to increase his debuff resistance by 10%, and he has Divinity B, which increases his overall damage by 175. So right off the bat, let me just start out by saying Gil has the best straight up charisma skill in the game, even better than Saber's. No one has a charisma skill higher than rank A+, so it's an extremely useful buff. Everything I said about Saber's charisma applies here, and even more so. He also has Golden Rule, which is pretty decent as it allows you to charge your Noble Phantasm faster, but it's not the most impressive skill in the world. And he has Collector X, which is good if you're building a crit team. Otherwise, it's not particularly noteworthy, although it is helpful after the interlude since it can further charge your Noble Phantasm. Also, I should note there's a difference between Noble Phantasm charge and increasing your Noble Phantasm rate. Golden Rule makes it so that your Noble Phantasm gauge charges 20% or more faster from your arts and your quicks and your buster cards. So if you use an arts card and you normally get 10% Noble Phantasm from it, if you use Golden Rule, that will jump to 12%. Now compared to Treasury of Babylon, which is what Collector X becomes after the interlude, which charges your Noble Phantasm by 20%. Which means it just adds a flat 20% to your Noble Phantasm gauge. So if you're at 80%, you use the skill, now you're at 100 and you can unleash your Noble Phantasm. The skills that add Noble Phantasm charge directly to your gauge are usually a lot better than just increasing the Noble Phantasm rate, so Golden Rule is a bit of a weak link when it comes to Gil's skill set. And Gil's passives are a mixed bag. Magic Resistance, as I noted with Saber, is utterly useless, just ignore it, it means nothing. But Independent Action is strong given how well it synergizes with Gil's Collector skill and his ability to absorb crit stars. And Divinity B is just a small buff to damage, it's nothing major, it's not a huge difference, but it doesn't hurt either, it's not useless. So he does have one useless passive, one good passive, and one okay passive. As far as leveling his skills, you should always go to max Charisma first, before anything else. And then you can decide on whether you want to level up your Golden Rule or your Collector based on what role you want Gilgamesh to play. For his command cards, Noble Phantasm, Gil has the same deck as Saber, which is Quick, Arts, Buster, Buster. It's the generic standard deck, making him able to fit really well into most team comps, because he won't skewer the decks in any which way. And he also has an incredibly powerful Noble Phantasm, which is further increased after an interlude. Gil's Noble Phantasm is an AoE, much like Saber's, making it good for wave clearing. Also like Saber's, it's a Buster Noble Phantasm, and he has 2 Buster cards, so he can bust their Brave Chain for insane damage levels. Now here's where things get crazy. Almost all AoE Noble Phantasms are bad at boss killing because they spread out the damage to multiple targets. It's a trade-off system. However, Gil, as we know, does not negotiate with anyone, so he says screw that trade-off system, and he has a built-in additional damage modifier against servants in his Noble Phantasm. That means the more charge his Noble Phantasm has, the more bonus damage he does against servants, which completely offsets the weaker damage to single targets rule that applies to pretty much all other AoE Noble Phantasms. So if you're fighting a servant, which 90% of the bosses in this game are, if not even more, then Gil can do insane damage to them with his AoE Noble Phantasm, making him also a strong boss killer on top of being a really good wave clearer. This is one of the best Noble Phantasms in the game across the board, period. But it gets even stronger after the interlude, which further buffs his Noble Phantasm damage by 30%. That is essentially a built-in mana burst in his Noble Phantasm after his interlude. It's completely insane levels of damage he can get off with his Noble Phantasm. So what team does this monster fit in? Well, he mostly works well in two roles. He can either be an offensive lead with two supporters who can buff him and heal him and debuff the enemy, or he can play a damage dealing role in a crit based team. Now, he only has one quick card, which is an issue, but his attacks hit so many times per card that he is pretty good at generating crit stars all on his own, even without using quick cards. And remember, his collector skill really helps him because it nearly ensures that all the crit stars are going to go to him, and he crits hard because of his passive. It may be a bit gimmicky, but if you want to go the crit team route with Gil, I really suggest leveling his collector skill after Charisma, and pairing him with either Hassan or Atlanta if you have her, since those two are amazing crit star generators. If you want to put him in a more straightforward role as just your lead damage dealer with some support, he pairs ironically well with Saber, since they can basically just charisma buff each other. Or, if you're not phenomenally lucky or rich and you don't have both Saber and Gilgamesh, you can also pair Gil with Shakespeare, who is easily obtainable from the friend point gacha and works phenomenally well with Gil, since he also has a mini mana burst skill that he can use to buff Gil's Noble Phantasm, and after his strengthening quest he also gets a skill that helps charge an ally's Noble Phantasm and increase their crit star rate. Both things Gil really appreciates. He also works really well with Hercules for obvious reasons, and because he can actually make a lot of crit stars, which Herc can then use to crit with and hit even harder. But if you're going to go that route, you have a really fragile team there, so I would advise against it unless you have a really strong support that can keep them both alive. My overall assessment of Gil is he is everything Saber should have been. Whereas Saber is good at everything, Gil is great at most things, especially everything that matters. He has very few weaknesses, but one of them is his traits. It's not something we need to pay particular attention to, but he does both count as a divine servant and a male servant, and there are a decent amount of servants out there that can do bonus damage to males and to divine servants with their skills or their Noble Phantasm, but hardly enough for it to be a concern. And while his charisma is great, it does get power creeped later on by other servants who have charisma-like skills that aren't called charisma, but essentially do the same thing by buffing the whole party by 20%. And on top of that, they have some added effect like charging everyone's Noble Phantasm and stuff like that, somewhat diminishing the effectiveness of Gilgamesh's just straight buff. But when my biggest complaint about him is that his strong party-wide buff could be even stronger, that says a lot. In my opinion, he is the best archer you can possibly get. Even in the Japanese version, he's still king. He is a great wave clearer, he can kill bosses, he can take out multiple servants at a time, which is, in certain events, very helpful because you'll be fighting multiple servants at a time. He can crit hard while also being able to generate enough crit stars, and has a skill to collect all the crit stars he generates. So on all fronts, he's really self-sustaining and really strong. There's really nothing bad I can say about him. And truly, we are all mongrels at his feet. My rating for Gil is a strong A, and I bumped that up to an A+ after his interlude, since that gives him a semi-mana burst on his already strong Noble Phantasm, and an extra Noble Phantasm charge effect on his Collector skill so that he can spam his Noble Phantasm. The only thing preventing me from giving him an S rank is that he doesn't completely break the game, though he does come pretty close. Alright guys, that's my thoughts on Gilgamesh. I wish you all the best of luck if you are rolling for him. I know I will be rolling for him. I hope I get him. I never got him on my Japanese account, so really I'm hoping you guys the best of luck, those of you out there wishing to roll him. And this will be an ongoing series, as I mentioned last video. Look forward to more videos. Not sure what server I want to do next, but I heard a lot of you guys making your voices heard, wanting me to do different 5 stars and even some 4 stars. So you can look forward to my next video. And until then, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, leave some comments, and if you want to see more, just go on and click that subscribe button. So until next time, guys, this is Silver Oni signing out. Later.